everyone, it's Megan. In the midst of my last speech, I proposed a question to you as my audience. How can one weigh the value of the classification of obesity at the individual level, but at the same time increase the health of society as a whole? As a quick refresher, I would like to remind you all of the issue that I've been focusing my speech content on, obesity and if it should be classified as a risk factor or a disease. The issue with labeling obesity as a risk factor is that it serves as a serious threat to population health and safety, as it implies that obesity is a choice. However, those in the scientific community who choose to classify it this way do not see it as such. Instead, they believe they are doing what is best and right for the scientific community and the rest of the population. The majority of the scientific community does not support the claim that obesity should be classified as a risk factor over a disease. Regardless of the two opposing sides to the argument, I am not here to convince you why you should feel one way or another. I am here to propose a solution. The CDC reported that in 2019 alone, there were 300,000 deaths in the United States due to the obesity pandemic. This ranks as the second leading cause of preventable deaths in the U.S. This is a concerningly high number for just a risk factor. The easy solution would include not treating obesity by itself, and instead waiting for other diseases to occur because of obesity. This is what would happen if obesity were labeled as just a risk factor. However, this could be viewed as a severe lack of effort from the government and everyone else involved in public health. If obesity were labeled as a disease, then preventative measures could be taken, such as more access to fresh fruits and vegetables with lower prices. Even though this makes sense and seems achievable, it could be a serious obstruction to individual rights, particularly to those who cannot afford to pay for fresh fruits and vegetables. As I had previously discussed, individuals within the population who cannot afford fresh fruits and vegetables are particularly susceptible to becoming obese if it is not taken seriously. Thus, these individuals are put at risk by those in the scientific community who classify obesity as a risk factor. Classifying obesity as a risk factor makes it seem like a choice, that people who are obese do not have self-control or discipline when it comes to eating. In order to protect individual rights of both parties, a potential solution would involve the implementation of public policy strategies. The United States government explains public policy strategies as a relatively stable set of purposeful governmental actions that address matters of concern to some part of society. Essentially, the implementation of any sort of public policy strategy allows for a widespread change in obesity-related behaviors instead of changing individual behaviors one at a time. In the words of the American Heart Association, a public policy in the context of obesity would include the development of national clinical guidelines, nutrition labeling on packaged foods, education and social marketing efforts, and more recently, calorie labeling on restaurant menus and federal efforts to increase access and financing for fresh fruits and vegetables. Just like one can do when they are shopping for themselves in the grocery stores, one could also check all of the nutritional values when they are out to eat. In order for this solution to work, legislation must recognize that this will take time to implement and would need to be fact-checked by nutritionists. The legislation would act as motivation for those who thought of obesity only as a risk factor for invalid reasons. The introduction of obesity-related public policy strategies to the United States would maintain the practice of individual rights while protecting those who choose to believe that obesity is a risk factor by encouraging the rest of the population to become healthier. Furthermore, members of the scientific community who want to classify obesity as a risk factor would not be punished. Their ignorance would just be overrun by the public. Public policy strategies would be particularly helpful in aiding those who do not have any knowledge in nutrition and do not know the best way to help themselves recover from this disease. However, there is a potential issue with this solution that many would propose as an argument. Public policies require time and exposure in order to make a legitimate impact on the health of society. Therefore, if a certain population of obese people do not have exposure to the results of the public policy, other methods must be implemented to ensure that they do. This would take a considerable amount of time and effort, especially to make sure everyone had adequate exposure. In some cases, it might not even be possible to implement the strategies. One prime example of this includes those who are too hindered by obesity to go to stores and restaurants and instead have people bring them food. Despite this potential and very likely concern, this does not mean that legislation should not be put into place. The implementation alone of such policy would cause those who want to classify obesity as a risk factor to second-guess their reasoning and consider the detrimental impact that they could have on others' lives if they continue to have the same mindset. At the same time, the public policy strategies would allow individuals to still make the decision that they believe is best for their health, separate from government interference. The debate about how to classify obesity will continue to go on until a concrete solution is placed into legislation and enacted. Public policy strategies are the solution that I believe best balances the good of society as a whole with the rights of the individual. Thank you.